All right, so we have a new episode of Tulsa King, and the plot for it is pretty much this. Dwight and Bodie lay out the casino plan for Jimmy, and as pressure increases, Dwight, Mitch, and Tyson assemble their team, and Stacy confronts Waltrip. All right, let's get into some of the things that happened in this episode. And the first one is something that happened in the opening part of this episode. And it's that Mitch is teaching everyone how to use guns. And why is he doing that? It's because there is a war happening in Tulsa pretty much. Whether it's Waltrip's guys wanting to go after Dwight and put him behind bars. Or if it's, eventually Charles's guys who are going to come over to Tulsa and handle Dwight. Also, something really dumb happens in this episode, in my opinion. Stacy goes to Waltrip's house and confronts him about what we all know that he did, which was he got rid of Roxy. And obviously, Waltrip had no reason to admit that because he'd be behind bars really quickly. But I thought that it was just a really dumb decision that Stacy would just go up there to Waltrip for no real reason and then just leave, which I think might have cost her later in the episode. Something that I predicted from last week's episode was one of the reasons why Charles killed his father, and one of them was so that he could be the leader and that he'll get to do all of the questionable things that he did before he was leader, and now he gets to do it without getting questioned. But in this episode, Charles, makes an order that they're going to go after Dwight, and one of his men did not agree with that. And what happened to that guy? Charles ended up, pushing him, shoving him, and obviously he didn't kill the guy. One, because he was at his father's funeral. And if he was willing to do that at his father's funeral, just imagine what he's willing to do when there's no one watching. Tyson and his father had a really great scene in this episode. And it's pretty much, Tyson's dad accepting that his son is his own man and he has to make his own decisions whether he likes it or not. And I thought it was a very beautiful moment. We didn't get to see Tyson's mom in this episode because she is crying, and she's probably crying because of the dumb decisions that Tyson's making. And I'm very concerned for Tyson's character. I think in my episode 2 review of Tulsa King, I said that he'll probably die, and honestly I would not be surprised because there is every single reason for the writers in this show to kill him. Another interesting thing that happens in this episode is that Stacy kind of got jealous of who Dwight was talking to. And it was in a scene where the FBI were talking about their case and how, things with Waltrip was going and how Dwight was involved. And she, wasn't really that happy when Margaret was mentioned with Dwight because maybe she was thinking, oh, this guy's talking to other women other than me. And obviously, Dwight and Stacy have an off and on relationship, but don't make the mistake. There are definitely still feelings there. Another interesting thing that I found in this episode was the fact that Waltrip is starting to show emotions that we usually don't see him showing. Like, usually he's calm, cool, and collected, but in this episode he's a lot more frustrated, and he is seems to be more fearing of what's going to happen because the FBI literally froze all of his accounts, I believe, or they're going to freeze all of his accounts. And the FBI are actively searching for him as well because, Stacy thinks that he killed Roxy, and us, the audience, literally saw him kill Roxy. Also, Charles ends up calling Dwight and basically tells him that they should meet for dinner and, get over their differences for the sake of Charles's father. But what he really wants is to get Dwight off his guard over dinner so that he can eventually kill him. But that's not going to happen anytime soon because something else ends up happening in this episode. Another thing that happens in this episode is that Armand and his wife end up going at it. And I don't mean like physically, but they're just having a shouting match in this episode. Why is that? It's simply because Armand's wife wants to leave Tulsa because she's concerned not only for her safety, but also her kid's safety. And most importantly, the guy who brought the dangerous stuff to the house. And Armand, even if he wanted to, can't leave because he's too involved with Dwight and the whole war with Waltrip and even potentially Charles. And I think for this episode in general, we see that all of the characters aside from Dwight have had really bad experiences ever since he's entered their lives. The last thing that happens in this episode is that Stacy ends up getting shot, and that was because Waltrip and two of his henchmen ended up pulling up on Dwight and Stacy, and they get into a quick shooting match. I believe that Stacy shot one of Waltrip's guys, but Waltrip ended up shooting Stacy in the arm, and then they, drive off in their bikes. And then Tyson, who actually left before the shooting, came back, but Dwight, tells him to get out of the situation because he doesn't want Tyson going to jail again. And then the police actually end up showing up, but Dwight is still there with blood on his shirt. So let's just say Dwight's going to be behind bars next episode. And overall, guys, I know that I said last week's episode of Tulsa King was my favorite, but I think this one might be. What did you guys think of Tulsa King episode 8? Did you like it as much as I did? Did you not like it? Let me know in the comments. And those are my thoughts on that.